Now, this is a big, long quote, obviously, from Susan Blackmore talking about lucid dreaming. And she cites the work of two other lady researchers I really respect a lot, Celia Green and Jane Gackenbach. Now, Susan Blackmore, she's got a lot of great ideas, but she's pretty much a reductionistic skeptic. She I think got into the UFOs or got into the paranormal really hoping to find the Holy Grail to prove psychic ability, but she's since become very hardened and disillusioned, you could say. But in this quote, she's summing up the research of Celia Green of the Institute of Psychophysical Research in Oxford. That's Celia Green back in the 60s in the middle there. She referred to these experiences in lucid dreams and perceptions of apparitions and out-of-body experiences as metachoric experiences. And this is just one more term for these types of experiences that most skeptics will consider fantasy or hallucination. But at least Celia Green was open to the possibility that there could be some anomalous cognition, some sort of psychic ability at play in some of these, though she too has pretty much been disillusioned by such. But the important thing about metachoric experiences is that what she found in studying quote-unquote hallucinations, apparitions, lucid dreams, and out-of-body experiences is that these experiences, they're often written off as the result of stress. You know, somebody started hallucinating because they were under a lot of stress. But what they found was that these experiences could happen in the most mundane circumstances. And what she means by metachoric is that the entire field of one's perception is replaced by hallucination, by this other reality. And yet the person can move around and doesn't seem to like fall on the ground and stumble, and they seem to still manage to interact with their environment. But I think this gets back to the idea I was talking about earlier of perception being a virtual reality, that the senses, the perceptions that you take as being definitive examples of the physical reality of your surroundings are in fact a virtual reality that can be superseded at almost any moment in these experiences. Now again, I'm not saying what the source is, but the point is that we can experience a wide range of phenomena that seem to contradict the foundations of what we consider reality. And she calls them metachoric. When I was in London for that conference I mentioned, I got to hear speak this fellow, Alan Worsley, and he's a true onironaut, an explorer of dreams. He was the first person to prove the existence of lucid dreams by communicating from the dream state to the technicians in the lab while he was dreaming. Basically, he had trained himself to give a signal by moving his eyes when he was in a dream and realized he was dreaming when he was lucid, to signal those scientists in the laboratory who had him hooked up to EEG equipment so that they could detect when he was in an actual dream state. So he was the first person to prove, because for a long time before that, no one actually believed that you could actually be lucid in a dream. Because if you're lucid, then clearly you're not dreaming if you're awake. But he said some things at that conference that really made me think, this could have relevance to the alien abduction phenomenon. And this quote here, it's maybe not from that conference, but it sums up what he had to say. "I am not given to superstition or believing in unnecessary entities, but perhaps the term dream is a little too bland to do justice to the ultra-realism of these experiences. For instance, if one dreams, as I have, in rich tactile and auditory imagery of being examined in the dark by robots or operated upon by small beings whose goodwill and competence may be in doubt, or abused in various ways by life forms not known to terrestrial biology, it can be very difficult to keep still." Now, keeping still is how he enters the state. He's actually trained himself, and this is something that very few people can do. He's trained himself to be able to go, not just become lucid in the dream state, but to go into the dream state and retain his lucidity from the waking state. And he does that apparently by lying still for like 2 hours or more at a time before he finally gets into that state. I've corresponded with one other person who claims to be able to do that. But he goes on to say, I suspect that many UFO abduction experiences as well as out-of-body experiences are examples of the same kind of thing. Now, again, Jacques Vallée published a seminal book back in the 70s called Invisible College, what scientists have discovered about the UFO influence on the human race. Well, what I didn't realize was apparently that book was also published under the title UFOs, the Psychic Solution. And because, of course, one of the things he tackles in that book was the fact that what all the other UFO researchers at the time were not willing to talk about, and that was the psychic aspects of UFOs. And here he sums it up by describing the types of manifestations that often accompany UFO encounters and which make him think that there's something more to it than just the idea of extraterrestrials. Heightened awareness of synchronicities, paranormal sounds and lights, and occasionally absurd coincidences similar to those described in poltergeist literature. In fact, a lot of UFO experiencers and encounter witnesses go on to start having psychic experiences. And experiencing sometimes poltergeist-like phenomenon. Now, the specifics of the parapsychology sciences that I think really do the most justice to the UFO phenomena are found in this book, and it's amazing. This book, if you've never seen it, it's massive. It's a huge, really thick book. It's basically the proceedings of this conference that was held at MIT, Cambridge, Massachusetts, back in the 90s, called Alien Discussions. It's just phenomenal. I mean, you could stun an ox with it. But to my mind, the best thing in it is the shortest article, and it's called The Possible Telepathic Spread of UFO Abduction Stories. It's by Brian Thompson. Now, this article that he puts forth is, like I said, very small, but it packs a punch, and he just goes through all the literature about how hypnosis seems to improve psychic ability. And so he posits, are hypnosis sessions enhancing a telepathic transfer of abduction scenarios from UFO investigators to abductees? Now, he's not dismissing the abduction stories as being fantasy. He's just pointing out that the parapsychological literature seems to show pretty clearly that hypnosis is a great way of transferring information from one person to another, and that maybe that's not the best tool to use in exploring UFO experiences. Now, I've had a lot of people come to me over the years and ask if they should get hypnotized to explore their UFO experiences, and I would say, hell no. I think hypnosis is a valid tool, but it's also very little understood. And again, I think the data suggests very strongly that it can just as easily cloud the situation as it can elucidate it. And we're running out of time, and I've still got many more slides. But again, going back to Jenny Randall's in England, she says it more clearly than I could. The evidence of psychology is at best split. And I find biased against hypnosis being used as a way to uncover even, say, a 75% truth level. So if we accept that 25% of all abduction testimony is fantasy, then which bits do we use to construct our ongoing theories and worldviews? Especially as these feed back into the collective unconscious and inevitably create false data in the next generation of abductees. Even if some true memory is emerging, and I suspect it is, by the way, the constant overuse of hypnosis is simply diluting the level of truth in the cases that emerge by adding in more and more fantasy. By now, I suspect the data emerging is so contaminated that it is dangerous to make any real assumptions from it. Now, she also used to belong to BUFORA, the British UFO Research Association, they voluntarily enacted a moratorium on the use of hypnosis in the 1980s. And as far as I know, they've not taken that back. They basically stopped using hypnosis for basically the reason she's outlining. All right.
Excuse me, Miles.
Yeah.
I just wondered, you said you have quite a few slides left. I wonder, and I would like to leave some time for questions.
Sure.
I'm sure there could be quite a few. We might consider doing a part 2 if you were interested in that.
It's possible.
We hadn't talked about it, but...
Well, I'd like to leave time for questions and answers. Maybe I'll just kind of go through...
It's a good place to break?
I suppose it is. It's before I get into the nitty-gritty of my ideas about this, but I'd really, I guess, rather give the opportunity for people to ask questions if they have any. So
I would like you to summarize your ideas.
My idea is not so much a new idea. It's basically based on a lot of the different researchers that I've presented tonight. And that is that the UFO phenomena represents a transpersonal virtual reality communications channel. That these altered states of consciousness that facilitate anomalous information transfer, that facilitate telepathy, remote viewing, ESP, they allow the potential for not just us to get messages from our own collective unconscious and the archetypes, but to experience the consciousness of other beings and other intelligences. Of course, one of the most common things in the abduction lore and the UFO encounter lore is this experiencing of telepathy with the beings that are perceived. And I think that's highly suggestive that may be the mechanism that's at play here. I basically feel that if you consider that the phenomena has been with us as long as we've been on this planet, then it's really silly to contemplate it as being extraterrestrial. That it seems to have been here as long as we have, so might as well call it terrestrial. In some ways, this gets into the ideas of other researchers like Keel, who called them ultra-terrestrials, and MacTonies, who called them crypto-terrestrials, that perhaps there's another civilization here that's interacting with us through this mechanism. And if I had to I'd say it's like that movie Contact by Carl Sagan, where Jodie Foster's character experiences a very vivid, real experience that of meeting with an extraterrestrial, except that it appears to her in the form of something that she can more easily comprehend.